All right, well, welcome everybody on a nice summer afternoon to the gallery. I'm glad everybody decided to come out today for this great talk. I'm limited how far I can go with this. With Leah Ollman and Sharon Ellis, the artist who has done these paintings on the wall. By chance, nobody knows. Make sure you look at these paintings closely when you have a moment to go around the room because they are remarkable. And let me introduce, for those people who don't know Leah Ollman, let me read a little bit, but I'm going to say you must remember the Los Angeles Times art reviews that she wrote for many years. And if you don't, here is your bio. This is your life. Leah Ollman has been writing about art for more than 35 years. Her reviews and features have appeared regularly in the LA Times, Art in America, as well as Photograph, the Brooklyn Rail, the Paris Review Daily, Contemporary Art Review, Art News, etc., etc. She has written essays for books for William Kentridge, Alison Rossiter, Julie Blackman, Michael Light, Chris McCaw, Claire McKenna, Mika Bean, and others, and contributed to numerous exhibition catalogs. And since 2018, now this is amazing, since 2018, she has served annually as a judge for the James Beard Awards. So be careful what you eat around her. She has an MA in art history from one of the greatest schools in the world, the Institute of Fine Arts of NYU, and graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Scripps locally. And her book, Ensnaring the Moment, on the intersection of poetry and photography, was just released by St. Lucie Books. And I haven't read it yet, but I saw some illustrations, and it is an incredibly beautiful book, and you should all look it up. Now, we have an artist here as well. Sharon, welcome. And I'm going to assume a lot of you know Sharon because you're here to hear what she has to say with Leah. And I'm going to read this, but I'm going to give you first my impression of her work because I have followed it for, 20 years now at least, and have always been astounded by her ability to paint in this sort of magical way. And this is not illustration, even though it's incredibly beautifully typed. It's not fantasy painting because it's also based in nature. There's just something transformative about these works, and they come out of months and months and sometimes years of working on one work. So if you think these paintings are labor intensive, you're right. They are indeed, but the payoff is extraordinary. And in the great tradition of the transcendentals, the painters of Agnes Pelton and Raymond Johnson here. Was it Johnson? Yeah. And Georgia O'Keeffe, and this whole way of somehow integrating nature into this otherness of philosophy that does end up answering the same questions that all the great artists about. And I'm not going to say what that is, but I think there is a clear kinship with this type of work that extends to a Jackson Pollock, let's say. So that will be a lecture for another time. Sharon received her MFA from Mills College in 1984 and a BA from UC Irvine. And Sharon's work is in the LA County Museum of Art, San Francisco Museum of Art, Long Beach Museum of Art, Laguna Art Museum, Walker Art Center, Minneapolis, and many others. And more than anything, I want to thank both of you for coming here today and taking a nice summer day and doing this, Sharon. The show is extraordinary. I'm interested to hear what you are going to ask, and thank you everybody for coming. So here we go.
Thank you, Michael. Can everyone hear okay? Is this on? I think so. Can everyone hear Sharon? Can you hear me? Yes. All right. Well, thank you, Michael, also Dorian and Karis. I'm really grateful to be here in conversation with Sharon today. I have been enriched and expanded, nourished and awed by her and her work for so long, 25 years. I've also gained something else through her work, which is an amusing and useful expression, a little vocabulary term. I don't think I told you the story, maybe I did. I wrote about Sharon's museum show Evocations in 2002, 2003 for America, and I went up to see the show at the San Jose Museum of Art. I remember it was a pretty quiet day in the galleries. It was mostly just me and a couple of school groups. And at one point, I was nearby, and a group of school kids was sitting on the ground in front of one of Sharon's paintings. And sorry, this got very loud all of a sudden. And the teacher or docent, whoever was leading the group, asked a question, and one of the kids in the group shot up his hand with this huge enthusiasm, started gasping and panting with this uncontrollable urgency. And the teacher looked at him very calmly, assessed his state, and explained to the rest of the group, this student has what's called art asthma. And then proceeded on with the lesson. And I think back at that scene and that term with a smile well, for lots of reasons, but I've also thought about it, the term, ever since, because that episode and that term captures a certain effect of Sharon's work on me, an effect on the whole body and the nervous system and the breath. It speaks to how the intensity of the paintings, the color, the symmetry, the totality of the worlds that Sharon creates, how all of that registers within my system. The experience isn't one of just taking in the work with the eyes. It's really a full-body phenomenon, a kind of absorption and mirroring of the work's own intensity and energy. I may not gasp or pant in such a detectable way when I'm looking at Sharon's paintings, but I do feel that same exhilaration that little boy did that day. I feel a change in my pulse. I feel the impact of the work on my entire self. So I thank you for that, Sharon. That is a gift. Let's start by talking about some of the formal elements in the work and your process, and then we can zoom out and discuss some larger ideas around it. And at the end, we'll take some questions. Can you walk us through how a painting evolves in practice? How you build the detail into a unified whole, how the colors build up? Just tell us a little about your methods and materials and stages of making a painting.
Well, I should say that I start out with a kind of a vague, blurry vision in my head about a painting. It really varies. Sometimes there are specific things in my mind at the offset, and sometimes not. But then what I do is I have to create the framework of the architecture of the image. So in some cases, My vision may involve trees in a general way, but then I have to decide what kind of trees. I have a lot of photographs that I've taken over the years, and sometimes I use photographs as reference. Sometimes I make up things entirely. But in a way, it's like every painting is sort of this a fictional thing where the different elements are characters that have to be cast. Like I may be thinking vaguely of flowers, but then my mind settles on a specific sort of flower. Like in that painting there with the morning glories. And actually this particular painting was making use of drawings I did many years ago for a different painting. So some of these images are literally being recycled, we might say. But everything is sort of part of the drama. And it's hard to explain.
We talked a little bit about color. You mentioned that the colors start out very pastel-y or soft.
Oh yeah, that's part of the work. That's a physical thing about how the paintings are created to begin with. I paint in glazes, so I tend to start out, everything is sort of pastel-y to begin with, because then as you build layers of paint, they become deeper and deeper. So if you think about it as being like a watercolor, let's say, really pale, and then you add more and more color to it, then things become darker. It gets very complicated because there are times where I have built up part of the painting where the color has become very intense and I decide I don't like it, and I have to actually like paint over it with white or make it pale again. It's very hard to describe something simply because these paintings develop over months and months. Yeah.
Well, here's one detail maybe you can talk about that really interested me. When I visited you, one of the paintings in the show was on the easel. I think it was midnight, and
Yeah,
one in the back. And I asked you about the pattern of the stars, and what you told me was so fascinating. I was wondering if you could talk about how you determined where the stars went.
Well, the stars in that painting, I originally drew for another painting many years ago. So there's a theme going on here where I've been recycling some of my, I shouldn't say recycling, I've been reusing some of the drawings from previous paintings. Because the thing is, I do countless drawings for every painting. And then, so I'll end up with this stack of drawings on tracing paper, which I never use again. And they've been building up over the years, so I started like looking at them again and reusing them to create new paintings out of. So in that painting, the pattern for the stars, I remember the time I was reading the book Chaos by James Blake. And it was about, if you've read the book Chaos, the Making of the New Science, it was this whole new thing at the time, chaos theory. And the fascinating thing about it was how so-called random things in nature are not random at all. And I was fascinated by this because as an artist, you're always like making up stuff and maybe making patterns. And I came up with a drawing, and I had a drawing of leaves, a whole bunch of leaves in it. It was all of the veins. I'm getting confused here. It was like I had a lot of rubbings of leaves. So I could see all of their names. And every intersection of the leaf vein, I put a dot, and that was a star. So the pattern of the star actually comes from the pattern of the veins and leaves. And what's interesting is when you do that, somehow a lot of things end up looking natural, because nature, and that was one of the things about chaos. Anyway.
I love that origin pattern. This relates a little bit to your use of symmetry. Can you talk about what appeals to you about symmetry and how you choose to use it?
Well, I think the main fascination with me and symmetry is that we are symmetrical beings. And there's something about looking at a symmetrical image where it has, we relate to it viscerally. And early on, a long time ago, I started using symmetry in my paintings. And at that time, this is when I was a student, I was fascinated by Art Nouveau. And also psychedelia, to an extent. There's lots of symmetry and symmetries in psychedelic art, with the patterns and all. I liked how symmetry provided this thing in the painting. It's almost like having a figure in the painting without having a figure in the painting. And it's almost like a body, but it's not a body, it's not human, but somehow it feels human. So it's sort of like identifying your own body with nature. I know that when I was in school, I think it was the first time I did some symmetrical things. I painted these paintings they were sort of cartoonish and they looked like faces. And so one of the instructors really hated them, and he told me, I had an uncle who was always like, taking pictures of trees, and he'd show you this picture of a close-up of a tree and say, look, there's a face in there, there's a face in there, isn't there? And my uncle was crazy. And so there's that other part of symmetry, but maybe that has something to do with, the psychedelia, drugs, and whatnot. But I'm a big animal lover, and I think for me there's something about that I love. Animals are symmetrical, humans are symmetrical. Anyway, so it has something to do with that. But actually, I don't entirely understand it at all. I don't understand why I'm fascinated with pictures of nature, to tell the truth. Why not something else?
Well, I hope you keep trying to figure it out in this exact form. So there aren't literal human forms.
Oh, I should say that a few times I have put an actual figure. Well, but it's more like a face, or like it's a Stanford thing.
That's what I was going to ask you about.
Where there actually are features, like eyes and a nose and a mouth, but they're not really human. Yeah.
So you can kind of read it. It kind of registers as a face or a presence. But
it is intentional and not crazy.
Fine line between those two. Talk to me a little about the scale that you work on, because it's so intimate and at the same time conjures such vastness. And we talked a little bit about the resonance between your work and Indian miniatures, and how you conjure, an infinite world in the cosmos, and on a very small scale. That you don't need to make something big for it to feel important or big.
Yeah, I don't think you do have to make something big. Sometimes I think, though, there are two different types of people. Some people, in like the art world, some people just can't handle a small work of art. I mean, it doesn't have any power over them, let's say. It has to be physically large to make them feel something. And I think I just easily relate to smaller images, and to me they can seem very vast. I don't know. My first experience with art was as a child with book illustration. When I was little, I thought I would be a book illustrator. So I used to just love going through books and looking at pictures. And for me, my art still has something of that in it, looking at pictures, which may be small, but they're whole other worlds, and you don't need to make it giant.
So it's interesting that the scale of the page is key, and there's also the pace of the page. These smaller works demand, I think, a slowness that isn't always present with a large work. They draw you close, they demand a certain kind of attention that's maybe slower.
Yeah. I remember long ago, I think this may have been like an art collector. I was reading something he said, he had this very strong belief that you should be able to look at a work of art for 5 seconds and get it or not, and that was it. It's like, I don't have time for more than I don't have time to give something under 5 seconds.
Sad like crazy. Well, back to process a little bit from a different angle. I remember asking you if you kept sketchbooks or journals, and what you showed me were several small books that were filled with quotations in your own writings, notes. They were very distilled and very powerful. And reading those really brought home to me that how much the work is generated from internal processes, as you said, with like the fiction, they're speculative fiction in a way, maybe more from the interior even than the exterior. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that, Leah came to visit me, and she wanted me to show her something. I said, here, look at these notes I made.
You're so dismissive of these notes, and for me,
And she actually wanted to read them, which I thought, just like, I haven't even read them myself. I hadn't read them myself, and they existed because every once in a while, this hasn't happened for a while, but I was regularly being asked to go and talk to students, and which was horrifying to me to like have to talk to students about anything. I had to show them slides, and I had slides of my work. So anyway, because I was so terrified of having to speak, I would start making notes to myself, like, well, something would pop into my head, and I think, that's something I can say. So I started making notes about things. But Leah was the only one who was having interest.
and I was very interested.
But when I read them myself, half the time I have no idea what I was talking about. Really. I still remember this one that still drives me crazy. For some reason, one day, this phrase popped into my head, and the phrase, it's really dumb, the phrase was, Garden of Mystery. Which is like, makes me laugh. I think it's so stupid. And I know at the time it meant something. I know that it meant, it was, and so I thought, I've never been able to bring it back to my mind what it is. So
We might get back to a little discussion of garden later, but in terms of your preparatory work and the notebooks, say you draw when you have to, so it's just interesting to think about the combination of your process drawing from your memory, your imagination, your readings, as much as from sketching from nature or photographs. And I keep thinking, and maybe now this is the time for you to divulge this great secret, but I keep thinking there's some very secret stash of cat drawings in your house.
I do not have the patience for drawing cats. I just can't handle it. Their cats are horrible posers. They don't cooperate. And there was one time when I was in graduate school, somebody brought a cat to the studios that we shared. And this cat, unfortunately, was killed by dogs who came into the yard. I was the one who mostly took care of the cat. It was awful. I drew a picture of him because I was in grief. I was so upset. So that worked out. I have to say, it worked out because he was dead. It wasn't really. It was like
the ideal model.
I don't know if I still have that drawing or not, but it was like a long time in words.
Your cats are sleeping a lot. They sleep 22 hours a day. I think you're just not ready to admit that there's a stash there.
Birds.
Birds? Drawing birds is even more than drawing cats. We used to have birds. I used to have birds. My late husband, loved birds, and we had quite a menagerie of birds.
Did you keep birds inside? You had some cage birds?
Yeah, well, these were birds that most of them were like rescued from. In LA, we were always coming across injured birds, and so they had to stay inside. My husband would let them out to fly around and put the cats in the other room. So, yeah. No birds.
No birds, okay, and no cat sketches. Clearly, time is a key element in your work. The time of day, time of season, or season of the year, even the course of time over the stages of a tree or a blossom. I don't know if this makes any sense, but I keep thinking kind of time is where your work is situated more than place.
So that's interesting. There was a point where, many years ago, where I think I was sort of in flux about what I was doing in terms of painting. And I realized that I loved the idea of frozen time. I loved that about paintings. I love paintings. I'll look at anything, anywhere, if it's a painting. And I was kind of, to me it was kind of sad that back when I was an art student, my fellow artists, they didn't want to do paintings, they didn't want to do paintings at all because paintings are old-fashioned, and why have a painting of like something happening, like humans are doing something in this painting, when you can make a video or a movie, and everyone can see paintings and videos are superior to pictures. Pictures are dead. We were talking about photographs that way. You know, I love that about photographs. That time, something frozen in time. To me, instead of being like disappointing, like why do that? I want to do something that moves and talks, and something that, in other words, something that is alive. The fact that it's frozen in time it's not dead and it's not exactly alive either. It's just really, I love that mystery, you know?
Yeah, I do too, and I also am intrigued by
Yeah,
all the different ways you can talk about it, and they're all true. You know, it's
yeah,
frozen, it's preserved, it's suspended, it's,
right,
you know, whatever you say about it, it's actually, they're all true ones.
yeah.
Do you want to talk at all about the physical locale change and how that might have affected your work when you moved from LA to Yucca Valley?
It's, I don't know if I can actually talk about it. It's one of those things where you move around and you're in a different place, and the climate's slightly different, and the light is slightly different. I will say this, when I moved to Yucca Valley, I felt like my brain just, like, was full of light and nothing. Like, I couldn't, like everything in my brain that was like part of my art making and image making had been sort of wiped out. But then I started working again. So there was this brief period there where I felt like, well, does this mean I'm going to make something completely different, you know? Which I didn't do, of course. Actually, I was very relieved that I was going to do something completely different. But yeah, I've moved to different places in my life, and every time it has an effect, but I just find it hard to really even understand myself what that is. But I do know that after living in Yucca Valley for I guess it's been like 12 years now, I have grown really, really sick and tired of paintings with Joshua trees. I even made some myself.
But you're not going to be contributing anymore to that.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, across the years and the change in locales and different bodies of work, there is a really strong continuity. It's impossible not to recognize your work as your work over decades. Which is not to say at all that it's repetitive. It remains consistently fresh, and each painting is a complete surprise. But I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that continuity over such a long period of time.
Well, I always liked the idea of style, you know, having a style. To be without style for me is to be without art. And sometimes I have thought that my style is basically just everything I couldn't get rid of, you know. It's like all the things that stick around, like can't get rid of this, because my work has changed. I've like abandoned some things over time.
One of the things that's interesting about the style over a long period of time is that we're all changing around it, and culture is changing, and the place in which we're perceiving the work is changing. And I thought about that just in terms of the way you engage time and sensation, and how differently we experience time and sensation now than in the 90s, when you kind of sort of solidified this style. We're so much further removed from immediate experience and tactile experience, and time is generally so much more accelerated through, digital phenomena and transmission of information. So I feel like I'm looking at the work from a different place.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
It feels more important than ever. It's kind of what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, that whole thing of the way culture feels right now, I just think, so much of it is just so depressing to me. I mean, it would be nice. It almost feels like it was a really long time ago where people were actually just talking about art. Like, look at art criticism now. It's like it doesn't even exist. Well, I can't say it doesn't exist, of course it exists, but it's just, it's not what it was. And I don't see that as being a positive thing at all. And then there's the typical thing, which I know everyone says this, and I say it too. Like, why can't I read a book anymore?
The attention span thing. Well, I think that's what I mean when I say that I think the work is, because of the way you do your work, it is more important than ever, and then it demands close looking, slow looking, all the things that, we're less practiced at in this moment in time. Well, let's turn back a little bit to one of the people that you might have had an orgasm experience with. That I did also was Charles Birchfield, and we both, as kids, had this kind of revelatory exposure to Birchfield. It opened up, seeing his work opened up something for you, and some kind of a sense of possibility.
Yeah, it was when I first saw a Charles Birchfield painting, and I had not seen very many paintings in my life at that point. It was at what was called the Fine Arts Gallery in San Diego, in Melville Park. I don't think until I saw that painting and had that experience with it, and I was like 11 years old maybe. I don't think I'd ever really seen a painting before. I mean, I'd seen paintings around, although my parents did not take us to museums. I knew very little about art. Like I said, I thought I wanted to be a photo illustrator, because that, to me, that was the only thing in my experience that artists did. But I think when I saw this painting, and it was a painting called Starry Night or Rainy Night. It's very evocative, it's beautiful, it's illusionistic in some way, but then if you look closer, it's a watercolor. If you look closer, you can see the brush strokes, you can see how he made it, and you can also see the illusion there too. The reflecting water. There's so many things. It's a very rich. All of his images are very rich, and it just gave me this experience that I hadn't had before, and it kind of opened me up to art, and specifically painting. I mean, I just believe so much that painting gives you an experience that you can't have any other way. Just like photography gives you an experience you can't have any other way. You can't replace a painting with a photograph. You can't, replace a painting with a video or something else.
One of the things that Birchfield is so marvelous at is very related to something you're marvelous at evoking multiple or engaging multiple senses in a way. I feel like he get engaged with sound a lot in his work. The hum and the vibration of crickets and bees and frogs.
Yeah, he would actually make these like abstract forms, like this, make an abstract form and say, this is the sound of a robin, or this is the sound of a cicada, or whatever. Yeah.
I think that a two-part question. The first is that I feel when I look at your work that there's a lot of temperature involved. That reminds me of Birchfield in some way. It's beyond visual. It's there's sort of a vibrating heat maybe, and also a sense of sound maybe or echo that maybe is related in some way to the symmetry. I'm not sure.
Well, I especially love it. There's a passage in one of his journals, or his journal, which is huge. I don't know if you remember, but he was saying something to the effect of, I guess I'm not like other people. I love the seasons. I love the weather. This is boring to other people, but it's not to me. It's that kind of thing. So yeah, he's inspiring in lots of ways. But weather's fascinating. It's getting a little scarier, but
More extreme. Who else is in your pantheon that you would like to give a shout out to?
well, I love Caspar David Friedrich. And in fact, I think that he probably kind of like experiencing his work really, got me thinking more about the whole scale issue and size issue. Because Friedrich's paintings, some of them are pretty big, but a lot of them are really modest. But somehow he's able to create this vastness, even in the small images. So I love Friedrich. And I also love more modern artists, of course. Like Agnes Pelton, for instance, and Joseph Stella. They were really great at bringing abstraction into the world.
Another manifestation of abstraction that I know is of interest to you is music. Not just the music of the birds and the crickets, but music played by conventional instruments. And you've talked about the relationship of music to ornament and the abstraction of both. And I found that really interesting. It's sort of helped me, conceive of music differently. Maybe it's
ornament is very musical, and we both love Bach, right? So just listen to Bach, it's just ornamentation gone crazy. It's all of those forms. One of the things that I enjoyed looking at that I didn't talk about is like Celtic ornamentation, which reminds me of music, and it reminds me of Celtic music also. So it's fascinating the way that works.
Pattern and embellishment.
Yeah. So I tend to love music that is complex. I tend to love classical music more than rock music because of its complexity.
I am not looking out at me, but is anyone telling me that it's time to stop, or should we keep going?
Oh, it's work.
Well,
What's your type?
I have, I have this many more questions, so, but I can take questions, we can take questions from other people too. I don't know what,
Maybe now's a good time to mix it up and
okay,
and see some reactions from people to questions, specifics.
Yes.
I have a question about the glow in the paintings, because I think that's one of the most unusual things to me is how they glow. And I know you told me about the process, the paint and how white canvas reflects back through the paint. But I'm curious if you started out really wanting things to glow, and if you did, why, or there's something about that.
I like that part, why?
let me repeat the question for people who couldn't hear it. It's about the glow of the paintings and whether you set out intentionally to make them glow, that in a nutshell. Kind of simplify what you're asking.
I actually, in a way, it was intentional. I mean, I wasn't really thinking only of that, but when I was young and my husband and I moved to New York City, I was seeing a lot of paintings that were like painted with glazes, for instance. And I loved the way they would look, and they do have this kind of glow because you're painting lots of layers of transparent paint. And so even a dark color can seem to glow, you know. So yeah, I was fascinated with that, and I reflected that in my work. What was the other part of the question?
Why and how?
Why and how do they glow?
Oh, well, you know, when I was learning to paint and trying to figure out how to make a painting, of course, like most people, I was like, you know, in class painting a still life. And when you paint something like still life, you are looking at a three-dimensional object and you're paying attention to the light hits it this way and the shadow is over here, and you have to paint that, and it's an object. But then I began, slowly over time, I realized that I didn't like that having the light source hitting a thing. I wanted the thing to be my painting, not the painting with things in it, subject matter. And so, so then I began to think about the painting as being the source of light itself, I guess you'd say. Yeah.
So, you know, when you're working in the studio, Sharon, are you working on multiple pieces at a time, or are you concentrating on a particular painting, two, or I'm just kind of curious how that works for you. And then secondly, you know, you come back to the studio on a daily basis, or do you take time away as well?
The question was, do you work on one painting at a time or more than one at a time, and do you come to the studio daily?
Well, when I painted the works on paper, I would have them, my easel is like a large piece of plywood, basically. It's at an angle. So when I was working on the works on paper, I would have like 6 of them taped up, tacked on to that board. So I could work on, I was sort of working on 6 at a time, although generally I would end up concentrating more on 2 at a time, and then 1 at a time, because it's hard to have my attention kind of like scattered around to different things. These paintings, it kind of depended on the size. The smaller ones started out as 2 on the easel, But then quickly, I would end up focusing on just one of them, for a while. So it varied, but actually, the main question, answer to the question is that I focus on one painting at a time. I'm not good at spreading around my attention. I know when I was a student, I was told that was bad because I think the point was you have to be working on a whole lot of things at once so you can maintain your distance from your work. And that struck me as odd. Like I felt like I don't want to be distant from it. I want to be completely involved in it, that kind of thing. And the other part of the question about if I leave the studio, or do I go there every day? Sorry.
Well, yeah, I mean, kind of what's your process, in a week or a month, and then, you take time away and then come back?
Well, generally, I like working every day. I really like working nearly every day. I mean, I'll take like Sunday off, generally. But sometimes I don't work that many hours in a day. It's not like 8 hours a day. I think my ideal day is like 6 days over a week, 6 hours a day, kind of thing.
Standing up? Yeah.
Earlier, our host was mentioning something on the opportunity that points to what it means to be human. And with the comments of sort of like mystical and magical and divine, I feel like encounters I have with those feelings usually reference them from randomly exposed as a form of meaningful part of life and having that enrichment experience with the beauty. And so I'm wondering if you're sort of really focused on the transcendent theme, have a little bit of that really deep reverence to life associated with high and hardship and that.
I don't know if I heard the whole, I don't know that I can summarize that well. It's a beautifully put question about, and please correct me if I get this wrong, having to do with your focusing on like a more transcendent experience as, I'm not going to be able to summarize.
Oh, I can try again.
Okay.
I just feel like often moments in life I encounter that feel very transcendent are generally because there's some preciousness about life that I'm only able to really appreciate because of some other pain. And likening, that concept to what our host was describing earlier about what it means to be human, both in like the fact that we are sort of divine teachers and very fragile as well.
Oh, so you're asking about the relationship of being transcendent to pain? I'm sorry.
Sure. There's an analogy of being human and how that does include hardship and if that will ever have an influence for your interest in this state.
That's hard to talk about, isn't it?
Well, I do remember asking you if loss played a role in your work, loss and grief, and I remember you saying, yes, it absolutely does, but I can't tell you how. Exactly.
Okay.
Maybe, I think that's touching a little bit on what the questioner was asking, is this preciousness of life, this stance, celebrating beauty, preciousness, does it come from having experienced pain?
Oh, absolutely, I think. Although, it's just one of those things that's sort of difficult to put into words if you're speaking about art itself or about a particular piece. But, that's one of the things that's so special about art. It's like, it absorbs so many things and becomes something beyond it. It's a cliche to talk about like art being immortal, but it kind of feels like it is in a way. I don't know. What do you say?
Well, I think what the woman posing the question was alluding to is that you almost can't separate out of this kind of transcendent feeling from the rest of life. It's all of a piece. It's all connected.
Well, that question makes me think of like, Leah has a book out. It's she edits it of poetry. Questions like that make me think of poetry. Sometimes I feel like I'm not good at talking about things like that, but poetry is so great at that. Poetry is so great at making something really beautiful about something really sad. And some of the poems in your book, because they have something to do with photography. Photographs have a way of evoking memories and pain, and then the poems that are written about them make that into something else. But yeah, it's not something I'm good at discussing or explaining in terms of myself.
We can change the subject.
Hey, I love to hear you talk about your work. I was fascinated to hear your comments about James Hood's book, Chaos. And I was thinking about the butterfly effect and, sequential atmospheric effects, which of course he talks about in that book. I want to ask you, how does disturbance figure in your process and work? Disturbance of any kind. Physical, cultural, political disturbance, period.
How does disturbance affect your work? Cultural,
Figure
political?
into your
How does it figure into your work? Any kind of disturbance?
I try to ignore disturbance in the world. Tell you that.
But disturbance is manifest in your work, clearly. It's manifest in your work.
Well, in the process of working on something, I continue, I love the idea of like creating something that in the end does not show the disturbance or anything in it. I'm not saying it doesn't have it, because I'm a human being and hopefully it doesn't seem,
It seems like what you're saying is the work is eternal, like there's no beginning and no end. It's kind of,
I think we should work on
Right.
artist-centered. I think let the artist-centered first.
well, I'd like to hear you.
Okay.
Jim, say
no, when I say the
We
word.
were talking about disturbance after all.
It's like the word eternal, like no beginning, no end. I don't see any disturbance of political intercourse.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, since you brought up chaos,
Yeah.
do you mean disturbance like,
Atmospheric disturbance, disaster,
disaster?
random variables.
Yeah,
Obviously you're not reducing these mathematically in any way or attempting to.
yeah,
But, you present either incidents or aftermaths or something beyond that. I think there is sort of a balance between what we might refer to as disturbance and what might be elicited as transcendence. And I thought maybe you have something to say about that.
well, I guess in thinking about those things, I see each work as being sort of a fantasy, you might say. So if maybe disturbance is one of the characters of the fantasy, but that's all, I remember in school we was given this assignment, and the instructor said, create a painting that's a manifestation of chaos. Oh, and this is chaos before, chaos the making of a new science. So this is not, he meant chaos in the sense that most people think of it. And of course, that's one of those assignments where you're obviously supposed to learn really quickly as a student, is that it's impossible to make an artwork that is chaos. It's just impossible. If you make something, it resolves itself into being something, and therefore it's not chaos.
Though I would certainly try.
Yeah. You may want a sense of chaos or disturbance. Yeah. I suppose if I see any kind of disturbance in my own work, maybe it would be a psychological disturbance. It's not like disturbance as in nature.
How does that come out in terms of pigments? Does that come out in terms of color or brush stroke or knowledge, or how does that manifest?
How does the sense of disturbance manifest? And then we'll go on to another topic. That's okay.
I think would be part of those would be part of everything. Would be one thing.
Right.
Yes, you talked a lot about your student days at UCI and Ellis. Do you have anyone that you keep in touch with from your days or from
Question was, you talk a lot about your student days at UCI and at Mills. Do you stay in touch with anyone from those periods in your life?
Well, my friend Kalani, who is here, was also at UC Irvine when I was there. In fact, her boyfriend, years later, became my husband. I'm in touch with her. I am in touch with a few people from graduate school, from Mills College. Yeah.
do you talk about is there an exchange in aesthetic?
Oh,
What do you talk about with your friends?
we mostly complain about things. No, we don't talk about art.
I hope you can hear me well. Sitting here and looking at the two works right here in front of us for a long time, hearing the discussion, they flip on me and they become catastrophic or apocalyptic on us. I think it's
as having a spiritual component, but also kind of a catastrophic, disturbing quality if they flip it.
Well, this painting, Tree Elegy, I remember while I was working on it, I was dealing with the death of my husband. And for me, still looking at it, that's what comes back to my mind. I've always kind of pursued, I guess you might say, something of the dark side of nature, because nature has a dark side. It's dangerous. Nature is our bodies, which fail, I think that at that point, in that way, there is like a disturbing quality to it. I've known people to especially tell me they liked the dark side of my work. I don't really pursue a side at all, but I guess I just try to do something that feels honest, and that always includes some dark aspects.
That feels like a perfect place to stop. Unless you want to have another last word.
No.